When you're right at the start of a mixing session like this, you're going to be bringing a load of new audio parts in and performances and recordings. And at this point, or in fact any other point in the project, you might want to alter the timing of a performance, the length of a performance, or the timing of the entire project. And there's quite a few different ways to do this in Reason, and I wanted to show you a few tips and tricks you can use to start altering the actual timing of performances before you start mixing them. Now, what I've done is I've exported the entire drum group into one audio file, and we can see the result down here. And it's basically just everything but the tom mics. So you've got the kick, the snare, and the ambient mics. And remember, again, it's not processed, but what we've got here is a very raw drum recording. There's a little bit of a click at the end, just because it's live and we've got a little bit of the next hit here. But it's going to be really useful for demonstrating these techniques. Now, overall, we can change the tempo of the entire project if we want to. And what this will do is change the tempo of every piece of audio or MIDI that's playing at that time. In fact, the entire project will be time stretched. And Reason actually has one of the best time stretch algorithms that's out there at the minute. It's not always been like this, but right now Reason is right there amongst the best. So if we go from 162 to say 140 and play back, the loop is automatically time stretched. Now, if I undo that and go back to the original, you can see that it's automatically updated in real time. Now, if we didn't want this to occur, I could go back to the song mode and I could right click and tick disable stretch. I'll just do that again. And now it says enable stretch. But if I disable it and change the tempo to 140, it remains at the same speed. So if you wanted to import a load of performances or audio files in, and then you wanted to change the tempo, but you didn't want certain files to change in your project, you would take this and make sure that it didn't change. For instance, when I first started this project, I imported everything in, or some extra parts that have been recorded elsewhere, and I didn't want them to change when I was adjusting the tempo. And I just made sure that this was enabled for some parts and disabled for others. And this meant that everything was locked perfectly in time. Now, there are a couple of other ways that we can change the timing of a performance. We can individually time stretch parts. So if we wanted to change the length of just this part and it wasn't quite 162 or whatever, if I change the length of it like this, it's just going to open up the length of the actual audio part. So if there was any more audio recorded, it's just going to be opened up here, and that isn't going to change the actual length of the part. But if I hit Alt, you see that the icon changes to a small clock, and this is the time stretch mode. With this engaged, once I change the length of the part, you can see that it's actually stretching the whole file. And I can move this to anywhere that I want, in fact, quite a way. Let's change the loop. Now I'm just going to just fade off that little bit at the end. But that's another way of quickly altering the timing of a part. Now, what happens if we want to actually change the groove of a part? Not just the timing, but the arrangement of each hit in a piece of audio. Now, you could split it up into its, separate components manually and place them onto different tracks and move them around that way. But Reason gives us a much better way now to do this. Now, if I double click on the audio file, you can see we've got something very similar to Recycle. And this is essentially what this is. It's Recycle built into Reason. And if you've ever used Recycle, the way it works is it splits the audio up into transients, and these can then be split and moved and edited, and in fact sent to a Dr. Rex player, which we'll be looking at in a later chapter. But for now, this drum part, say I want to move the snares around, we can make sure that the snap is on to say 1/16. And you can move them around until they sound cool. And this can be done with any part. Obviously, we're mangling the loop here a fair bit. But completely changing the groove. Not necessarily for the better, but there you go. That's how you can change the groove or the placement of individual hits within an audio file. So if there's one snare hit that's maybe out in a fill, you could quickly move it. And a bass part, the groove of a bass part could be changed. But that's the 3 ways of changing timing, realistically. You can disable and enable stretch per clip. You can stretch each clip individually. You can stretch the whole tempo of a project and disable and enable particular clips within that stretch algorithm. And then you can move around the segments of a dynamic part in this way once it's been analyzed with this internal Rex type engine. For the final part of this chapter, I just wanted to show you that we really should concentrate on putting fades in the right places and fixing faults. You can see in this loop, for example, if this was in the project, I'd be fixing this loop and taking out this little byte transient here at the end. But I'm going to just quickly trim off any parts of the audio and any noise or room noise that we don't want. And we can make sure that once we start processing that these aren't going to be amplified and present in our mix.